Have you ever heard the rumor that sponsored Yu-Gi-Oh boxes sent to content creators are rigged? It seems like just about every streamer opens a Phantom of Yubel, a Wanted Sinful Spoils, or a Fiendsmith engraver. It's certainly odd, especially with the awful nature of Yu-Gi-Oh's pull ratios and with how notoriously scummy Konami is as a company. Sponsored boxes is already a form of advertising for Konami, so it brings the question if they're juicing the pot. Do these sponsored boxes have a higher number of valuable chase pools than the average box? Do sponsored boxes contain more financial value than a regular box? And if so, to what degree? This is of course a very serious question, because it would be alleging false advertising and even fraud, especially with a large part of Yu-Gi-Oh's audience being children. So, to answer this question, I've decided to do an in-depth analysis into Yu-Gi-Oh box openings and show my results. I'll be walking you through the process of my study. Let's start by defining what we're actually looking for. There are two main things that would indicate stacked sponsored boxes. First, if there are statistical anomalies that couldn't be explained by the naturally varied pull rates. And second, if there is a constant pattern of weird pull rates or of sponsored boxes being higher value than the average box prices. I could also consider higher value to mean like big marketable cards. If we can't find either of these two things, streamer boxes likely aren't rigged. If we find one of these, then there's some evidence to suggest there might be, but it'll be iffy depending on the severity of the evidence or trends. If we find both, then it's very likely streamer boxes are rigged. I'm going to be analyzing the sponsored pools from the sets The Infinite Forbidden, Legacy of Destruction, Age of Overlord, and Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge. Starting off with Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge, just by breaking down what several case openings look like, I found that there are actually 3 different types of secret rares in the set, each with their own distinct pull rates. There's a middle rarity, with about one every other box, or 40 to 60% chance per box. These are reserved for average cards like Ritual Beast Inheritance or Sprite Starter. These are good wanted cards, but nothing that drives a set. The least competitively desirable cards, or the least hyped cards, fall into the highest odds of pulling, usually being over 70% chance to pull in a box. These are mostly unused cards like Ace of Spades Speculation, or bulk reprints like Infernoid Harmonic. These cards are the vast majority of double secret rares you'd see in a box. And lastly, we have the true short prints, anything with a below 30% chance to pull per box. These are the chase cards, Phantom of Yubel, Spiritual Beast Tamer Laura, and, for some strange reason, Oil. There are some noticeable gaps in the pull rates for these cards. It's astonishing to see how direct this lines up. Despite being marketed as one rarity, there are clearly 3 distinct rarities in this set's secret rare slot. I'd call this at the very least false advertising, but this isn't the point of the video. Now let's take this and line it up and compare it with the pull rates of sponsored creators. For the most part, these do line up very well, but there are a few odd data points we're going to want to look at. Sponsored boxes saw twice the expected number of Phantom of Yubels opened, which is suspicious. There's also close to double the amounts of Proxy F Magician, Gigantic Sprite, and the Ritual Beast Link. These are more odd. Sponsored boxes open below the expected number of Ulti-Gaia Pelio, the Legendary Exodia Carnate, and Void Imagination. Nothing too odd there. But for almost every short printed card, we'd see about a 10% decrease in the sponsored boxes. Infernoid Flood, Grand Gula Dust Dragon, Red Lotus Flame King, Brionac Dragon, and Spiritual Beast Tamer Laura, all the most notable examples. If Konami was rigging a set, it would be very odd to decrease the pull rates on every chase card, except Phantom of Yubel. If you were rigging a set, it would be very likely you'd want to make the short prints look non-existent. Now, this is odd, but let's look at that Phantom of Yubel specifically. What I'd like to have done for the Yubel odds disparity is to see how it fits for the average case pull rate variance. Sure, the average would be about 1 every 4 boxes, but how likely is it we could see 1 out of every 2 boxes for a single opening? Unfortunately, there is a physical limit on the number of cases I can verify openings from. At least not enough to get a statistically sound picture of the variance. So the best I can really do here is offer a best guess on the data I've seen. And I think Phantom of Yubel being double the pull rates isn't outside the realm of possibility at all. We have a few cases that get close to this level of variance already. Plus, the sponsored boxes aren't actually a case, so it gets more messy, because there would be more variance. So, while notable, the increased pull rate of Phantom of Yubel cannot be used as evidence for Konami sending out rigged boxes. Unless it's a trend for future sets, we're going to have to discard this. So let's analyze these boxes in a second way. Are sponsored boxes worth more on average than our regular boxes? If we calculate up the total values of every box and lay them out, we get a distribution as follows. Yeah, that's right, your expected value on an $80 booster box of Terminal Revenge is $20 to $50. Now, you might be wondering what those random jumps in values are. That cluster of $200 boxes are specifically from boxes with QCR Spiritual Beast Tamer Laura and Sky Striker Ace Rage, and those 3 $700 boxes are from Dragon Master Magia being pulled. Now, let's separate this data into sponsored versus non-sponsored boxes, and they line up very well. The average price of sponsored boxes is double regular boxes, but it's entirely due to that single Dragon Master Magia pulling up all the other low-value sets. If we swapped out the Magia with an average QCR, they'd almost match in value. Of course, all those Yubels do pull up the median price. And as I said before, this will be useful to note if it is a trend that continues for future boxes. So let's do an actual test. I'll be doing a chi-square test between the standard and sponsored boxes to see the impact on the data. And once we do it, we find there is not enough evidence to suggest a relationship between sponsored boxes and the value of the expected pools. That's a pretty definitive statement right there. So far it seems the boxes themselves might be rigged, but the sponsored openings are not. Let's now go through some of the main sets and apply our test to them. I won't be looking for short prints in these, since according to Konami, main sets don't have short prints anymore. Looking at the sponsored pools for Age of Overlord, the only noticeable cards with a higher than average pull rate is Wanted Seeker of Central Spoils and Diabellstar the Black Witch. But the odd thing is, they also pulled way less SP Little Knight than expected, and a whole lot more QCRs than expected. Which is odd if these boxes are rigged. Infinite Forbidden has even pull rates for just about everything, albeit with two caveats. The box errors that were noted by everyone else were also experienced by the sponsored content creators. But these errors were not in favor of these content creators. There were lost secret and ultra rares. Also, there were less QCRs than expected. And that's odd if these boxes are rigged. I'm gonna be honest, I don't even think Konami is sending the content creators their best products. Legacy of Destruction also has even pull rates, albeit this one is more shaky since there's less sponsored openings for this set. If we compare the expected box value to the average sponsored box value, we found that the average of sponsored box value pulled lower than what the average should be. Rev's cards even opened the lowest value box in this entire study, being a $3 box of Age of Overlord. The point is that these aren't rigged boxes, these are just actual random boxes. I do want to mention that the reason sponsored boxes are likely to be lower is because the data pool is so small. It's about one case. They lack the few spicy big hits that dramatically bump up the average value. It's the opposite of what we saw in the Terminal Revenge opening. So, when we remove the QCRs in the same way, it's almost the exact same average. Let's recap. There are likely no unexplained variances in sponsored boxes, and there's no pattern of increased value or even marketable pools. I don't like Konami, but they're in the clear here. I don't believe sponsored box openings contain rigged pool results. The terrible value proposition and jank pool rates experienced by the average consumer are experienced by sponsored content creators. In fact, it's blatantly not the case. Sponsored box openings are rigged once you actually start looking at it, even in the worst examples. But then how did this rumor start, and why does it continue to spread? Well, I'd like to theorize a combination of three factors. First, other non-named content creators have faked box openings before, albeit those were more with faked editing and taking cards from other packs. It's really not at all applicable to Konami's sponsored openings. But that idea that this is possible never really goes away. It's a thing that can happen, so people will look for it. The second reason comes from the nature of box openings themselves. Look, a good content creator will make you feel the excitement of the good pulls they do get. And after opening a $3 box, I too would hype up the Wanted Sinful Spoils I pulled in the next. You take these highlighted moments and mix it in with selective memory or confirmation bias, and it seems a lot worse than it is. But that's the next question. Why are people looking for Konami to be in the wrong, even when they're not? I think it's because it's the norm for Konami to be so in the wrong. They're the worst out of any TCG product, both quality and pricing wise. They don't communicate with the player base, and they're already committing false advertising with short prints. Konami would be the company you'd expect to engage in such a scummy action. And I'll even admit, the reason I started this study was because I thought there was something here. I was looking at Konami's long history of other terrible actions, and when combining it with some circumstantial evidence, it seemed to me like something was up. Imagine my surprise when halfway through the study, I started turning up evidence that Konami's in the clear. It just kinda seems wrong. But what I want to get at is Konami's scummy actions in the past do have a cost. It might seem intangible, but community goodwill and trust matters. When a kid hears from a local about how awful the game is, or sees how absurdly overpriced the game is, and chooses to instead pick up Magic, Pokemon, or One Piece instead. When top players leave one after the other, when attendance at events reaches an all-time low, or when an unverifiable rumor comes around and you just want to believe it. There's a massive price to Konami's awful actions. To reiterate, they're in the clear on sponsored box openings, but they're still guilty of short printing, awful pull rates, bad communication, terrible card design, overpriced products, upshifting rarities from the OCG, bad local support, the worst pricing out of any card game, terrible card quality, no new player entry points, increasing the rarities on new Master Duel decks, a lack of value in products, release schedules, unholy amounts in power creep, the worst tournament support out of any card game, etc., etc. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. For my Yu-Gi-Oh audience, sorry this video took so long. Data entry is not fun. Plus, committing to a study that you wish went differently is difficult. I'll do it every time, but it is something to get used to. I'm stressed and anxious enough as is. If you appreciate the work I do in my videos, please subscribe. That's a pity ask. Oh, I should not have put that there in the script. If you want to react to this video or use any graphics or charts from the study, go ahead. I link the data in the description. Transparency is the way to go. You could critique my errors that I'm sure will show up. If you have any questions, ask in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. I don't quite know what the next Yu-Gi-Oh video I'm going to be doing yet is. Honestly, the study kind of burnt me out, but I do have some ideas. I haven't talked about the design of the game in a while, so that's probably what I'm going to do. Anything on the commercial side is likely to be negative, so we don't need more of that right now. In the meantime, check out my One Piece stuff, or hell, even my non-TCG stuff. Watch one of the game reviews I do. Don't worry, you can't pick wrong, they're all cringe. See you next time. Thanks for watching.